Gonzalez.
Well, African heads of state are convening today in Equatorial Guinea for a week-long African Union summit. There's been a wave of arrests leading up to the summit, with police detaining an estimated 100 people. According to Amnesty International, the police crackdown is intended to prevent pro-democracy protests during the summit. The country banned protests after uprisings against long-term rulers started in the Middle East and North Africa. Equatorial Guinea is a tiny country located on the west coast of Africa that has grown in importance since its vast oil reserves were discovered in 1995. It currently is chair of the African Union, but many human rights groups are opposed to its involvement in the summit. Human Rights Watch reports that Equatorial Guinea is rife with politically motivated harassment, arbitrary detentions, and unlawful killings. This is Arvind Ganesan of Human Rights Watch.
Torture has been widespread, arbitrary detentions have been widespread, and in fact the government even resorted to kidnapping political opposition from abroad at times, or their family members, in order to make sure that there was no real challenge to the government's power.
Human rights groups have also criticized Equatorial Guinea's government for spending an estimated $830 million on diplomatic accommodations for the African Union summit, while neglecting the rights of the country's impoverished majority. The summit is being held in a city built just for the occasion, with luxury villas, an artificial beach, and a golf course. Equatorial Guinea's dictator, Teodoro Obiang, has led the country since 1979. Despite his human rights record, he has maintained relations with the United States and many U.S. firms, including ExxonMobil and Hess. In September 2009, Obiang posed for a photo with President Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama in New York.
For more on Equatorial Guinea and the African Union Summit, we're joined by Tutu Alicante in Tampa, Florida. He's the executive director of EG Justice, a U.S.-based organization dedicated to promoting the rule of law, transparency, and civil society participation in Equatorial Guinea. Welcome to Democracy Now! Can you talk about the situation right now in your country, in Equatorial Guinea?
Certainly. First of all, thank you very much, Amy, for this invitation. This is an honor. What is going on in Equatorial Guinea, as you have expressed during the introduction, is the African Union is holding a summit in Equatorial Guinea, in Malabo, the capital of Equatorial Guinea. Back in January 2011, when the African Union announced that it was bestowing on President Obiang the honor of chairing the African Union, our organization, EG Justice, which is an organization ran by Equatorial Guineans mostly, called on the African Union and called on the president at that point to ensure that some of the key principles, some of the shared values of the African Union would be implemented in Equatorial Guinea. And these are values that are shared universally, values of human rights, respect for human rights, democracy, ending corruption, investing in health and education. And these are things that up until today are not taking place in Equatorial Guinea. Despite that, as you mentioned in the introduction, the government has spent over $830 million in building a city just to host the dignitaries for 1 week.
And this comes at a time when 75% of the people in your country don't even have running water?
Exactly, and I should say, almost jokingly here, that I've been concerned recently, right, because the president of Equatorial Guinea says there are no human rights violations in Equatorial Guinea. And yesterday I was in an interview in which the Equatorial Guinean ambassador in the UK said there is no poverty in Equatorial Guinea, right? So I've been concerned that I might soon lose my job, if there are no human rights and no poverty in Equatorial Guinea. Clearly, this is a country that, as you mentioned, according to UNDP statistics, according to World Bank statistics, IMF statistics, etc., over 75% of the people in this country are still living on less than $1 a day, are still living without running water, are still living without sanitation facilities. So to spend that kind of money to host foreign dignitaries for 1 week, it seems to me is preposterous. It's a waste of resources that should be going to improving life for people in the country.
As you said, Tutu, government officials in Equatorial Guinea insist the human rights situation in their country is improving. They warn against what they call foreign meddling. This is what Carmelo Mekong of the National Commission of Human Rights in Equatorial Guinea told the Christian Science Monitor.
We are obligated to respect peace. What we don't want to accept is a decree from certain countries saying Equatorial Guinea is violating human rights and this and that and so on. There is no unique formula.
Tutu Alicante, your response.
Well, I should tell you that, I was also in an interview, in the interview yesterday with the ambassador, the EG ambassador in the UK. One of the things that he said is that those of us that criticize Equatorial Guinea are people that have never been to Equatorial Guinea. Right? Unfortunately for them, I am from Equatorial Guinea, and I've been to Equatorial Guinea, and I was born in Equatorial Guinea. But what I would say, just last week, on June 11th, there was a German TV crew. This is, I think they call this ZDF. They was in Equatorial Guinea filming the women's soccer team, which should be participating right now in the Berlin competitions for women's soccer. And this group, after interviewing the team members of the women's team in Equatorial Guinea, also interview kids playing in the slums, and interview political opposition, and interview members of civil society. And the government heard that and confiscated all the footage that they have gotten outside the interviews with the women's soccer team. Now, if this is a government that has nothing to hide, if this is a government that think we are meddling, those of us that are outside are meddling, why would they be confiscating footage from a crew that was just recording what they've seen in Equatorial Guinea? Right? So clearly, this is not a case of foreigners meddling into what's happening in EG. This is a case of a government that, rather than investing in its people, is just investing in these big, fancy elephants, big buildings and stadiums and things, just to show the international community that they are building something, when in fact life for the average Equatorial Guinean has not improved since the oil discovery.
Let me ask you about that. How is it that there is such desperate poverty in the country when the country is now rich with oil? And what's the relationship between Equatorial Guinea and the United States and American oil companies?
Well, that discrepancy that you mentioned is exactly what baffles most of us, right? The fact that this is a country that has the highest GDP per capita, income per capita in Africa. I mean, its income per capita, it's on par with Japan and Germany and the UK, yet most people in EG do not have running water. Where is all that money going? We know that the government of Equatorial Guinea, well, the president, his family, and his son are all under investigation. They have been under Senate investigation in the U.S. There is an investigation going on by the French judicial authorities right now. There are a couple of investigations going on in Spain for money laundering, for basically using the monies of the state to buy villas around the world. The son of the president, for instance, owns a $35 million estate in Malibu. We just heard yesterday that the government just purchased another high-end apartment in New York. So basically, this is a government that, rather than spending money inside the country, government officials, primarily the president and family members, are using all that money to buy properties outside EG. What's the relationship between Equatorial Guinea and the United States? Well, oil was discovered in Equatorial Guinea about 15 years ago, mostly by American companies, right? The big American companies. And most of that oil that is produced in Equatorial Guinea is oil that American companies, bring to the United States, and it's consumed by United States consumers, right? And at the time that getting oil from the Middle East and other places, war-torn areas, has become a challenge, definitely places like Equatorial Guinea or Nigeria or Angola, where there is no war, have become points of interest for the government of the United States, right? Now, I should say that today, we can say that the United States has improved from the days in which Condoleezza Rice would have said that Equatorial Guinea was a good friend of the United States, right? We have improved, and we know there more anymore. However, the U.S. hasn't, at least to our liking, hasn't shown what is the progressive foreign policy that it has towards Equatorial Guinea. At a time where President Obama and Secretary Clinton have made wonderful speeches leaders in Accra and other places in Africa about the importance of promoting democracy, about the importance of promoting transparency, about the importance of using the natural resources of Africa to benefit African people. Yes, we haven't seen the U.S. government push President Obiang on those principles.
And finally, 5 seconds, the oil companies that are involved, we're talking Chevron and which others, as well as MPRI, the Military Professional Resources Initiative based in Virginia, getting a $250 million contract last year?
Yes, I think Chevron is no longer in Equatorial Guinea, but yes, we are talking about ExxonMobil and Amareda Hess and Marathon and some smaller companies, as well as MPRI, you know, which are heavily invested in Equatorial Guinea.
We have to leave it there. Tutu Alicante, thank you so much for being with us, and thank you to WEDU PBS station in Tampa. I'm Amy Goodman with